Cool. So for anybody that is not in this Slack group, there is the link to jump in it. I know I see some of you are already in it. So I would say that what we do in the Slack group is really just try and share best practices when it comes to MLOps. And we've got a lot of machine learning engineers, data scientists, some consultants, software engineers, a little bit of everything. And we all try to help each other when it comes to our projects and what we're doing, what tools we're using, what we've seen. So yeah, feel free to jump into our Slack group and share your wisdom with us or ask questions, whatever you feel like. The other thing that I was going to say, normally we let everyone be allowed to talk. So if you want to say something, feel free to unmute yourself and you can just say it. Or if you prefer, throw it in the chat or the question and answer. And Dmitry, I think, will happily answer it. I'll remind him in case he misses anything. But that's about it for me. I'm glad you guys are here with us on this. This is a bit of a weirder MLOps community meetup because it's on a Thursday. Normally we have our Wednesday meetups, but I really was excited when talking with Dmitry about what he's doing. If anybody doesn't know who he is, he's the founder of DVC.org. Many of you have probably heard of that, or you've started on GitHub as a great project that's doing really cool things when it comes to data versioning. And I didn't realize this until you wrote it out to me, Dmitry, but DVC, it stands for data version control, right? So yeah, there we go. Now, just by way of introduction, I wanted to kind of bring you in, Dmitry. You've been awesome when it comes to the community, and I know that there's a few people from DVC that are hanging out in the community, and they've also, Ellie is one of them, doing some great things. And today our goal was to talk about data ops and data version control. And then you're going to give us a bit of a peek on how DVC can link up with other tools to make a bit of a more complete pipeline, because DVC does one thing really well, or a few things really well, but I know that a lot of people have had questions about when you want to get that whole pipeline together. What are some options? How do you deal with dependencies? Those kind of natural questions that arise. So before we jump into any of that, let's take it from the beginning. How did you start getting into tech, Dmitry? What was your foray? And I know you're in Silicon Valley, or you're in the US, in California, San Francisco right now, but you're not from there. So can you give us a bit of background about you? I think you may be on mute. Just a heads up. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So background. Originally from Russia, I was born in Siberia and raised in Siberia, like far, far away from civilization, like 3-hour flight to the big cities, to the closest big city. But then I went to university to study computer science and got Ph.D. Work as it was like applied math department, and I did kind of data image related stuff like maybe 20 years ago when neural net didn't work actually. We play with this a lot, but usually like just more traditional tools work better these days for image processing, specifically for image recognition, even image recognition. And then I worked as an engineer for a while, got PhD, worked on university. I led a lab at university. We have like a relatively small lab, around like 5 folks in core team, plus dozens of students and PhD students, as usually happens in lab. And then I joined Microsoft and moved to Seattle, which for me, like for a guy from Siberia, it was like a warm place. For folks from US, when you say like Seattle is warm place, they kind of joking like, no, it's supposed to not to be like a warm place. Yeah, and I was always like thinking about startup, about this like startup culture, tried to do like one startup right after university with friends, and we got some like website and even like users who paid us, but it was not the story like a traditional story from Silicon Valley when you kind of have a clear path like what to do, like how to monetize, how to scale, and all that stuff. And at Microsoft, at Microsoft I was data scientist at Bing. So in relevancy team, I have seen how data science work in a large organization, what tool they use, how do they automate the process, what best practices they use. They have built the entire like platform specifically for machine learning, specifically for their kind of AI needs inside Bing. And I was thinking, wow, it's a cool, but so I'm as a data scientist, like clearly see the value of those tools. I couldn't say I like the tool a lot because like it creates like a too much like complexity. But when you think about like the value of the tool for the team, it was very clear that the value like is huge for the team, for like all the parties involved, for data scientists, for data engineers, for software engineers, for managers. Like everyone was using tool in a different ways, and we were able to collaborate together.
When was this? What year? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was about like 5 years ago. 4 years ago, I left Microsoft.
Okay, perfect.
Like 6 years ago, like 4 years ago, in this range.
And so then, how did DVC come about? Or first,
yeah, and
you had Iterative.
Yeah, and when I look at this like AI platform, I was thinking, all right, but I kind of like this. I see the value, but the question was, how this AI platform should look like in 10 years? Is it like the state of the art, which will stay with us like for a long time? And when you start thinking about it, start kind of think like how it can work outside, you can quickly realize it won't work outside because it's too specific for Microsoft. It's too specific to Bing, too specific to infrastructure and our processes. And I spent quite a lot of time, maybe like half a year, 1 year, to like think like deeper about like possible like solution and how it should work in the next like 5-10 years. And my belief is this should work as a kind of, first of all, it should be like open source solution. Also, I don't believe like a single open source solution can cover needs of modern data scientists. What I believe is an ecosystem of the tools. When you can like have some particular tool for ML training, resource orchestration, some another specific tool for kind of metric visualization, the third specific tool for like deployment or connection to deployment. And team can like can pick and choose the tools, right? Because deployment, like there are a bunch of ways how to do deployment. There are a bunch of ways how to do resources, right? Cloud, not cloud, Kubernetes, not Kubernetes, local resources, like etc., etc. And I believe in this kind of like ecosystem. And when I start thinking about ecosystem, I like, all right, let's try to make some. And I was like playing Kaggle a little bit, like doing some like other project just to kind of learn more machine learning. Like DeepNet become like popular this day. It was a good time to kind of start to get into this deep network world and convolutional networks. And I start building, I start working with kind of resource orchestration part first, right? How to get resources, how to like train something and shut down my machine, how to not to waste too much money on this expensive GPU instances. And I start building some solution. It worked pretty well, but what I realized, any solution you try to build, you face a problem of data management. Data versioning first, and data movement, like how to move data from my machine to the instance, like cloud instance, or how to get data to my like teammate who I play Kaggle with, for example, or some do some other project for blog post. And I realized until you solve the data versioning problem, you cannot build this like AI platform, right? This is supposed to be like connecting kind of protocol, if you wish, connecting tool between the pieces, right? Between the resource orchestration, between your metrics visualization part, between deployment part, between like all other pieces. And I got this idea, okay, let's solve data versioning problem like quickly. And then I can like focus more on the resources part, on the more heavy part. So this is how I
on
stuck.
the quickly, right? It was
Yeah, this is how I stuck with DVC. So now we are 3 years past, and
just a
we are
quick
still
side
building.
project that
Yeah,
you
and we're
had.
still building this DVC. Yeah.
So you wanted to talk to us today about data ops, and I know that for some of us in the Slack group, there has been a few questions around what is data ops? What does that mean? How does it differ between MLOps? And so I'm wondering, how do you see that right now? What is your opinion of data ops and the difference between MLOps, if there is any?
So I think first of all, it's just a terminology question, right? I don't even think it's like super important question. But what I can say is we to build MLOps tool, any MLOps tool, data operations is a crucial part. And any data platform, any ML platform, any AI platform has this insight. You might see it or you might not, but it is there. And my fundamental belief is you need this part to be kind of more unified. You need kind of a common protocol which works with one AI platform, with one deployment system, with one experiment orchestration or visualization system. And only this way you can kind of connect these pieces together. And in this way, you can understand on a deeper level what is going on your AI platform. So my belief is data ops is kind of prerequisite for the ML ops. And until we solve like data ops in a holistic way, whatever it means, we cannot get like significant progress all on ML ops.
Yeah, that's great. Now, going into the idea of data ops and when you wanted to create DVC, why were you so set on it being an open source project? And for anybody who doesn't know, I read the blog post and you guys hit 5,000 stars on GitHub, so congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, it was
That's
like
awesome.
a while ago. Yeah, but yeah, thank you.
All right, I'm just getting up to date then, but that's really cool and great news. But yeah, so what exactly was it that was the driving force to make it open source?
There are few points here. First of all, I believe on this kind of ecosystem, as I said, right? And it's really hard to imagine how proprietary tool can be this like building block for the ecosystem, right? Building block for the ecosystem has to be open, and an extreme way of openness is like open source, right? So only this way all the parties can agree to use like the same set of tools, the same of kind of assumptions behind the collaboration. So this was first. Second, I just don't believe you can make money on the versioning, on data versioning, on code versioning. For some particular niche, for example, if you go to like, I don't know, healthcare and specifically for like image or patient's records, yeah, you probably can. But if you're talking about like AI in general, about like horizontal platforms, I don't believe there is a way to monetize those. This is the second reason. And the third reason is community. Even like 3 years ago when the project was just started, I understood that I cannot build by myself because like different people have different opinion, right? I need feedback. I need users. I need a lot of users who kind of give me like a broader picture of like what is missing, what needs to be done in a different way. And the community helps a lot to define this product. And I believe this is the major driver of DVC kind of growth of the DVC. Community helps us to define the project, a product to set the priority, and it took us 3 years to say we are ready for DVC 1.0. Right? 3 years we were like, first of all, building stuff, then collecting feedback, and only today we are releasing like DVC 1.0, like hopefully next week. Everything almost ready for this. Yes, like 3 years of collecting requirements, talking with users to building
That's
this stuff.
huge. Wow. Yeah. And I think that shows, though, anybody who's used DVC really understands that you have that attention to what people are asking for and how this feature, yeah, it's great in theory, but really in my workflow, I don't need it, or I need something that does this. And so you all have been great to incorporate that. Now let's dive into what you're doing exactly a little bit more for those who aren't really sure about it. And why is data versioning so much different, in your opinion, than just code versioning?
Cool. All right. This is like what we learned in 3 years, right? Yeah, there's some obvious stuff, and the others it's maybe not obvious that we kind of learned during this process. First of all, we had a problem with the first problem you have if you work in any like ML project, it's amount of data, right? When you start ML process, I mean the modeling process, you usually deal with megabytes and usually gigabytes of data, like 1 gigabyte, like 5 gigabytes, sometimes like 100. It might go like up to like terabytes, but usually it's within like gigabytes and hundreds of gigabytes. Which means the traditional version system already doesn't work, right? Git doesn't work like some like perform, for example, other version control system might handle this, but they're not perfect on this. This is very first problem. Second, people would like to utilize the cloud storages, right? If you build like the entire versioning system, your own versioning system, you need to like create a storage for this system. And one of our assumption was people don't want to create a special storage specifically for versioning. They would prefer to use their backend like regular storages like S3, like cloud storages like Azure, like file service, right? So our big goal was to work on top of those instead of like creating this storage on storage. The next part is not about data. So data, it's a very important part. It's a crucial part. It's the first part you are facing and realizing that Git or other tools do not work. But actually data, it's not only about files, right? For data scientists, they don't really care about files, right? What they do care about is like what is inside first. They do care and how to understand what is inside. They think about data in terms of like metrics, metrics for source data, metrics for ML models, right? This is what is important. And another part of this is plots, right? This is the way how you visualize metrics, right? It's kind of the same as metrics, but it's kind of a different entity from tool point of view. I believe a good data versioning system has to have all these components. Data management with large files, metrics, as well as plots, all together.
Yeah, that's such a great way of looking at it. And can you give us some use cases on how you see people using it? Because I know that it's not the whole pipeline. So what are some use cases of how different companies or how different end users are utilizing DVC?
Yeah, so DVC itself is just technology, right? You can use this in many different ways. So for example, Git, right? It's a versioning system, yes. But people use Git in different ways. They automate their workflow. Git serves as a protocol as a tool for collaboration between folks in the team, between people and systems, right? This is how you tell your deployment system, hey, I'm ready, like let's go and deploy this stuff, right? Or let's revert back to the previous version. So this is kind of fundamental component of the workflow. And DVC is the same. So people use it in a different way. And I would separate two types of scenarios. First of all, is just use DVC for versioning, data versioning. And usually it's a part of modeling. Sometimes it's not just about data, and sometimes it's a part of the modeling. And the second part is automation. When people use DVC as a building block for their workflow or their AI platforms. So in the first side, when you use DVC, there are also several ways of doing this. In super simple way, it's just to put data and version your data. When you have, for example, like dataset is changing, it's evolving over the time. Sometimes it's like daily, sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's not very often. But you need to kind of keep control of the versions, and you need to be able to get back, for example, or you need to remember that this model was built with this data set, not that one. So this is the very basic use case. And in this case, people use DVC with Git under the hood, right? DVC uses Git under the hood, and your storage. Storage that you prefer, like S3, like Google storage, or just file server. This is a very common use case, and this is like the very basic one. More advanced use case is DVC as a part of experimentation. So we use we have like metrics, right, associated with data, and you can treat model as a data asset in DVC as a data set if you wish, and you can attach some metrics to the source data, right, like summary metrics, for example, as well as metrics and plots to the actual to the model. And you can version like all the pieces together, and we have like notion of pipelines, right? It's kind of the recipe, like how to come up with this model using this data, and you also can version this lightweight pipeline. So this is important to distinguish the pipeline in DVC, right? Kind of ML pipelines and pipelines from data engineering, like Airflow, for example, right? They're kind of different pipelines with different goals. And yeah, this is the second use case for kind of human usage of DVC. The third use case would be optimization, which is also very common, especially in large companies. Not large companies, but like bigger teams. When people, for example, many people work on the same hardware on the same machine, for example, like one huge like GPU instance, and several data scientists have different accounts, right? And you don't want to duplicate data. For example, some team might have like terabytes of data. One company has like 70 terabytes of data. They don't want to kind of create copy for each of the users. So they create like a common cache, which we call common cache, and they do like versioning inside their account with this common cache without any duplication. It's kind of optimization, I would say, of their workflow. But it shows how different the workflow are, right, in data science, and how much pressure creates large files.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, so I was talking about like human ways of using DVC, right? So like three common scenario how humans use DVC. From another side, as I said, DVC is used as a part of automation, right? As part of the platforms. And if you're talking about automation, there are several use cases. How can you use DVC? Not how can you use DVC, and how you can automate stuff with DVC. One of the most common use cases is CI/CD for machine learning. When people kind of automate for example, ML training. And actually, this is another cool thing. In machine learning, there are many types of CI/CD, like how can you use CI/CD, like data validation, training by request, model validation by request, and experiment sharing. So it's like even CI/CD shows like how complicated machine learning is. Yeah, in CI/CD, DVC can bring your artifact, your data set on the training phase, for example, right? When you run like CI/CD process, usually you have your repository, and the next question would be like, all right, but like what way is my data, right? And this is what DVC can answer you, like here you go. This is your data. Just run, in addition to Git pull, just run DVC pull, and you'll get your data the right version of your data, and you can train and push the model back to your storage and shut down the machine when you're done with the job. Yeah, there are a couple more scenarios for automation, like deployment, like how people use deployment, DVC for deployment, to connect deployment with kind of with repository. The way how to address your model through your Git repositories, when you can say, okay, I'm deploying some stuff, please give me the latest version, right? Which means like pull the model from master head of master branch, right? Or you can say, you know what, like my master kind of behaves strange. I need the previous model, or I need a model from this like branch or this like particular commit. And DVC kind of can give you this, abstract you away from the storages, from the your S3 buckets, from your file storages, and you can communicate with your files through kind of in a Git notion, in a kind of GitOps way. You can work with your data. All right, I think it's enough, and this is like 5 scenarios that I have mentioned.
That's perfect. Yeah, really interesting. Something that came to mind for me when you were talking about all of this is, as you're hooking up this whole way of using DVC, we had a guest on about a month ago, Sarav, and he was talking about, you know, the standing up of the products is, in his words, trivial, although for some of us like me, it's not so trivial. But what he was saying is how it's one thing to just stand up some open source tools on your computer and use it for your projects or a Kaggle or whatever. The other thing is, if you're going to bring that to your company and you want it to be at enterprise grade, who's taking care of the security, who's taking care of the patches, who's taking care of all these little things that a data scientist or a machine learning engineer maybe doesn't have in mind. They can put together the pipeline, or they can do all that. And I'm wondering if you've seen how that works with DVC, like those other questions that aren't involved, who's updating it, making sure that it's updated. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah. So first of all, there are kind of many questions related to enterprise usage, how enterprises uses open source, right? And it's actually depends on the nature of the tool. For example, for some tools are heavy, and it takes time to kind of start using them. You need to create a project, like let's set it up, let's move data there. Let's connect this to other tools to bring value, right? It's kind of a project, and for this third project, you need like a budget, right? You need approval from like your department to bring the tool inside. For other tools, you don't need any approval, right? For example, you need to use some specific library, and you probably don't need to approval to like people install the library or like bring this like library through your R studio or something. Or version control system. Version control system are kind of on the way when this library are, right? You just install it and you use it, right? You don't need like a special approvals. You don't need to set up a server. For example, DVC is serverless. We don't have any servers. We align on your like Git server and storage, right? You don't need to like create another machine with a DVC server. They're not such a thing. And for these tools, it's like very easy. People just like start using those tools, and that's it. And then managers realize like, oh my God, like what is this like again? And we have like a few stories like this. For example, one manager from a large startup contacted us. Maybe it was almost a year ago. It was a startup, like huge startup, like wow, more than 1,000 folks in the team. And he like, hey guys, I just realized our team is using DVC. Like, let's have a talk. And what happened? He found a blog post about DVC, and he like was thinking like, yeah, it seems like a good idea. I should share this idea with my data scientist. And she shares this idea, and data scientist, yeah, we are using DVC for a couple months already. Yeah, so this is how it works, right? So DVC it's kind of a library in this way, right? You just install it and you start using it, and then DevOps folks start asking you questions like what it is and what we should deal with. So this is like one part of this question. The second part of the question is how about stability of the tool? How about the release cycle? How stable the tool? How safe it is? And this is another learning from the probably past years. What we realized, first of all, during the development process, we prioritize speed over all the other priorities, right? Our goal was to deliver feature like as soon as we can, learn fast and deliver fast. And we did like a small releases all the time. Whenever we have something, we just go do release. Sometimes we do like 2 releases a week, sometimes even 3 releases a week. But on average, it's kind of about like 1 release every week, every second week, like quite often, right? But in the last year, when more and more companies start using DVC, we realize it's kind of hurt some folks because all these releases sometimes like, have some issue or like unexpected changes. And with DVC 1.0, which is we are releasing like next week very soon, we are moving to a slower kind of iteration process. So right now we have more formal testing process. We have built benchmarks for performance, and all these pieces like we use all these pieces for kind of more formal releases. So we won't be releasing like 2 times a week anymore. And this is like a bad news, but the good news is the tool will be more stable, and hopefully the hope is like it won't hurt our users, so they can like safely use the tool.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to get into also about dealing with dependencies and how you've seen people work around that. But before we do, I see a question in the chat from Fabiana, and she's talking about when talking about DVC with others for adoption, for example, enterprise level, was it easy to show the value for the organization? And big DVC fan there. Shout out, Fabiana.
Value. So it depends on what stage you are. If you just start using DVC, so you actually might have some issue to show the value for your managers especially, right? Because DVC is command line tool, and when you say like I need to use this tool, they kind of don't maybe understand like deep enough like why you need this tool, and it's hard to show the value from the command line, right? It's not like so like impressive and visual and stuff. So, but when it becomes easy to show the value, when a few team members are using DVC. So, and we have seen like many companies, many teams like this, when one guy starts using DVC, he likes DVC, he shows like to the teammates, right? Some people just don't care, mostly like managers like who don't work like by hand, who kind of don't understand the pain point we are solving. The other people like just get it and start using it, right? And then like more and more people inside the team start using the stuff. Then some correspondent teams start using DVC, and they connect and share some resources between each other. And now the value becomes like absolutely clear. Like more people involved in this ecosystem, more value you get. Because it's kind of part of the automation. If you use DVC, you automate some stuff. And more stuff you automate, more people are involved in this automation, more value you see. And then it's really easy to explain the value to managers, right? Because this is how I pass my result, my models to her, and this is how I use her data sets for in my modeling process, right? And now it's become kind of more less clear to managers, like why do we need this stuff?
That's perfect. Yeah, and that's a great question too. So before we jump into dependencies, I'm wondering, do you have any cool technical details that engineers would love to hear about DVC? Maybe what's the back end look like? What are you using under the hood? What's it built on? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the cool stuff about DVC, we don't use backend. So it's, as I said, it's absolutely serverless. It's just a tool on top of your Git stuff. And I think the cool stuff for engineers specifically, not data scientists. Data scientists don't care about this stuff usually, but what is cool about engineering part of DVC DVC actually, technically, it doesn't do any versioning actually. What DVC does, it creates meta files. It codifies your data. It saves the pointers to your data. It saves the information about the pipeline as a meta file, and Git does the actual versioning. Right? This is kind of like a interesting, to my mind, technical solution. And if for engineers, it usually reminds them, like, for example, Terraform, right? What is Terraform? It's about like codification of your data infrastructure, not data, of your infrastructure, right? And this is like one of the like widely adopted tools in the DevOps space to codify the infrastructure. DVC does the same thing for data, for ML model, for artifacts, for metrics and plots. So that's it. This is kind of the beauty of this approach. We don't like invent the versioning system. We just like inventing the way how to codify your data, how to codify your pipeline, and Git does the actual version.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I think you had mentioned that to me before, and I loved hearing that. It's just a great workaround, or a brilliant way of doing it. And
actually, I would not even say it's workaround. Today, like codification, it's a well-known practice. It's a well-known pattern. And today, we apply this pattern when it comes down to infrastructure management. If you do codification properly, you can do GitOps, which is kind of another level of automation in the company. And the same applies with data and DVC, right? If you use DVC, you do codification, and it helps you to automate all your processes inside. So it's quite a common pattern, I would say. We just use the pattern. We haven't invented anything new in this way.
Brilliant too. It's really well done. So now talk to me a bit more about how you see people dealing with dependencies and just the chaos that is the whole ML pipeline, and how it can be more organized when it comes to, because I've heard people say that, when they use a few different tools, they call it like a Frankenstein. They'll Frankenstein everything together, and it's tied together, it's working, but it's hanging on by a string, and you never know what is going on. So how have you seen people work with dependencies and just making sure that the pipeline is solid as they're using all these blocks that you talk about?
So there, I think when it comes down to dependencies, there are a lot of types of dependency, right? First of all, data pipelines and how dependency look like inside data pipelines, and data dependency, library dependency. But I think it's like we can skip this part, right? As library dependency. And this second and the third one is dependency between the tools, because people and teams sometimes use like tons amount of tools. So what we should discuss, like tools and
I think
data.
The tools one is probably the most interesting for me. I don't know about everyone else that's here. You can let us know in the chat, but for me, that is something that I know it can be a headache sometimes. So feel free to jump into that one. If anybody else has anything else to say, let us know. But otherwise, let's jump into the tools.
Yeah. Let's start with the tools, and we can jump back to data dependency. With tools, I totally agree. This is one of the biggest problem today, and the one we have. Why do we have this problem? Because today we can solve almost like we have tool for almost every problem in data world. We have a bunch of deep learning frameworks. We have a bunch of cool ML algorithms for kind of more traditional ML algorithms. We have libraries, we have languages for data-specific languages. They have some advantages, disadvantages, and some people use like different languages like R and Python on the same project with Spark and Scala, of course, right? Why not? Also, there are like a bunch of frameworks for different stuff, like databases. Like, for example, Elastic can be like a part of your data workflow. A lot of people use, not some people use this as a framework for kind of data processing. A lot of different stuff. The problem is Today, I believe the biggest problem on ML team, on mature ML teams, it's not even how to solve the problem. It's not how to create the model or some data artifacts. It's about how to manage all the complexity around this infrastructure. So all the cost of creating data models or data assets is shifting from kind of get the model to operational side. And I totally agree that this is the problem of dependency between this all the pieces together. And this is one of the reasons that I believe to the ecosystem of the tool. Once your tools cannot collaborate together, speak the same language, you cannot solve this. It's because every tool has its own APIs, right? And you need to like connect them all the time together, and there are like billions of ways how do you connect to them. And this is, I believe, the biggest challenge for this kind of
so how
for
do
the
you
next
see that?
couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. Like then in the next couple years, how do you see that playing out in your mind so that everything can play nicely together? Or is there going to be a standardized stack that people use, or is it going to be something that you just have to integrate with the most popular ones? Where does that play out?
I believe today, because of complexity is so huge, right? And overhead on operations is so huge, the most simple tools will win this kind of competition, right? And it's not about like the value the tool provides, because sometimes the kind of competitive tools, it will change to the what tools can be like widely adopted, what tools is the easiest one for my team, for my org, and those tools will establish the formats for communication, for collaboration between the tools, and the rest of the tool will kind of join these protocols. In case of DVC, when it comes to data management, our basic assumption, our fundamental assumption, DVC, we'd like to reconstruct your workspace as it is. So you work with your files. You don't know like what is version about. You just read the file, right, with some particular name, without any like prefix like my file blah 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 version like ABC 74. No, you just like read the file and you do versioning like outside. It's the same way as any like versioning system does. And when you work with a clean space, a clean workspace, right, then any tools can be used, right? So you can inject like any tools in the DVC pipelines, like Python, R, just like random tool which was like written on C++ like 5 years ago. If it can read files and output files, so it's ready to use inside DVC and DVC pipelines. And I believe if you'd like to make your tool like widely adopted, you should bet on the simplicity. And if you choose between tools, you should choose simplicity, because it has just higher chance to kind of win this race.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, but I wonder, like, in my mind, is it going to be you're using, like you said, there's a tool for everything. And so is your stack going to be gigantic where you have 10 different tools all plugged together? Or do you see DVC growing outside of what it's doing right now?
In terms of gigantic stack, I don't think it's a problem if you have a clear classification of the tools. For example, in software engineering, how many CI systems we have? Oh my God, I don't know, like dozens of popular CI systems, thousands of custom CI systems. Some people just reproduce CI system by themselves without kind of even thinking this is CI, right? Is it complexity? Even today, no, because we know how to work with CI system. It's not important today, like what CI system you use and what exactly value kind of you bring from the CI system. It's just like a one building block. And when you replace like one CI system to another CI system, the rest of the team like understand what you are doing. They understand that nothing special has changed. it's just a matter of some like small details, right, which might matter for some like particular guy, but not for the entire team. And if we come up with this kind of generalized workflow, if you wish, then a huge amount of tool, it's not a problem. It's actually advantage and luxury for the industry to have all of those. The biggest question is like how to identify the workflow, the common workflow we can like all agree with, and the tool developers will be kind of plugging into this workflow.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so in case anybody out there wants to ask a question, feel free to jump in. I'm wondering if you've seen, you've been doing this for 3 years now, and I'm sure you've had millions of learnings, but have you seen any best practices that you could share with the rest of us that you feel are, as far as MLOps go, something that is relatively important that not a lot of people are using, or just something that you think everyone should be doing? Any kind of best practice in recent time?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I can advertise data version a lot, right? Because because I'm kind of biased a bit. But instead, I can say, for example, what you shouldn't do. And I would suggest, it depends on stage of your company and on your team. I would suggest not to focus on the tools when you build your first model, when you build your first data product. Just don't worry about the tools at all. Give flexibility like for your team members. Try to make it like, try to trust them, and give them like as much flexibility as you can. And when your team like 2 people, maybe 3 persons, it's still fine to not to push tools. And I believe it's even beneficial to not to push tools. When you need to start to think about the tools, when your team becomes like 3+, it's kind of scaling problem, right? This is when scaling comes in place, and when start hurting the team, the relationship between the team and managers. And this is the only time when you should start thinking about the tools. And also this problem become even worse, and you will need the tool when you have like a few teams, or even like 2 teams. Then you should more think deeper about the tools, automation, processes, workflow. Yeah, but please don't overcomplicate it in early stages when your team is very small.
Yeah, that's such good advice, and I think that's something that you really see when you need the tools, you will know, because the pain or the repetition of something
Yes, exactly. So the pain should be like a big enough, big enough to start solving this. But the team should be like wise enough to think a little bit ahead. Because when pain will be, when you see the pain, it might be like a bit too late, right? It might be result of, I don't know, losing some revenue, right? When something already broke, and then the question would be like, why we haven't thought about this like 3 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's usually in life, right? So you need to find the balance um, between the kind of formal processes and flexibility, between stability and flexibility. We have the same problem with our release cycles, as I described before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So now I'll ask 1 or 2 more, and then I'll let you get on your way. I know you're a busy guy. You got a company to run and an open source project to continue releasing. But I wanted to hear, is there anything else about this data ops and the agile movement of data that you want to talk to us about?
oh, we covered many questions, right? In this. So what is so I would say the most important part is just to think about data management as a special activity, and don't kind of undervalue those activities. because some platforms, some solutions like hide this complexity, and you just don't think about this complexity because you suppose it's solved. But when you start using the tool, you can easily realize that this solution on data management, on all the assumptions behind data storages and management, it's not actually what you think. So please pay attention to this. This is one of the crucial part of your AI stack on your AI team, and it will kind of affect your strategy, if you wish, and some like tactical solution a lot down the road.
Great answer. And I see Carlson has a question here in the chat. He's asking, based on your experience, are data scientists naturally able to leverage DVC with their usual ecosystem inside Jupyter Notebooks? Or do you think it could become a bottleneck for them to iterate quickly with experiments?
Okay, this is a great question, and we return back to the question of like finding the balance between agility, right, and the stability, the formal workflow, and the process. Yeah, and when you work on Jupyter notebooks, especially on the first version of your models, second maybe version of your models, especially before you are ready to productionize this, I would not suggest to like use automation, and especially push to automation, right? In this particular case, DVC and some other tools can give value of just like bring the data for data scientists and do whatever you want with data, right? It's kind of a protocol between like data, your data stack and data scientist. When your process become more mature, so you will realize you need something more. For example, Jupyter Notebook is great, but you need to make sure that it can work, for example, from beginning to the end, which is not a usual case of Jupyter Notebooks, you know, like the nature of the notebooks. And so you can put like these requirements, like very first requirements for data science team. So if you commit your Jupyter Notebooks, please be sure it is working from the beginning to the end. So our automation system can handle this, can work with this Jupyter Notebooks, right? And then with more and more mature process, you kind of start leveraging more and more automation tools. And this is when DVC kind of will play well as a model registry. DVC will play well as a pipelines, as a part of CI/CD if you need to move your model to the production server and train Jupyter notebooks to production server and train them and preserve the model and deploy the model somewhere. Yeah, it plays with this, but in the different stages, it plays different roles. So this is the answer.
Great question, Carlson. Thank you for asking that. And now I am seeing, I think I'm just going to ask one more, unless anybody else has one. I was going to ask about, like, with DVC, can you just talk to us a bit more about this model registry that you just were mentioning? And
yeah,
because I know that that's really popular, or actually a necessity, especially when it comes to fintech or banks, and how they need to be able to show what, because of regulations, what they're doing with machine learning. So I'd love to hear a bit more about just model registry and what's going on with that.
Yeah, model registry is one of the scenarios, one of the common scenarios how people use DVC. This is very simple thing from DVC point of view. This is just a way how you can put models in some repository, your Git repository, which means data will live in your storages as usual, right? But DVC will handle all the versioning stuff, right? And this is a way when you can address models through your Git repositories. When you can say something like, I have, for example, this model, and I need this version of this model and that version of that model, please bring it to me. And I will use these models for my, like, for example, next model, or to generate some report, or like any other data product that you built. So this is kind of a lightweight way how to make how to make proper versioning for models, how to store them properly and reuse them properly.
Yeah, and does it also, when you have these model registries and you have the models, do they go back to the code that it was versioned on, or is the code and the
Yeah,
data version together? That is the question there.
yeah, it's about like data lineage, right? Like how to connect this. Yeah, you mentioned right this
Yeah,
scenario from
exactly.
like fintech and healthcare.
Yep.
So exactly, yeah. So this is the next level of kind of maturity of your process, right? If you need this, do you need this? And if you need this, of course, you should do kind of proper automation around the model registries, right? For each model, for each version of each model, you should be able to answer the question like, how I get this? What data source was used? What version of the data source was used? How can I get this
Exactly.
data? Yeah, so DVC does this with the pipelines, right? DVC has notion of this ML pipelines, and all the data, all the information about the pipeline can be versioned on the same way. So you can, as I said, you can say, hey, give me from this repository, please give me that version of that model, and DVC will kind of bring you the right artifact, not from the repository, but from the actual source, right? And if you clone your repository, you will see how this model was generated, what command was run, and what data file was used and what version of data file was used. So you will have like proper lineage for this process. And another cool thing is DVC can handle like any complexity of these pipelines. So usually for like a regular machine learning models, there are like a couple stages on the pipeline. In deep learning, it's usually one stage, right? Or maybe two stages, like data processing and the actual versioning. For other, for example, NLP, they're usually like 3-4 stages because featureization is more complicated. I have seen like up to like 20 stages, and they sometimes they're linear. In many cases, they are not the kind of the entire tree or direct acyclic graph of those dependencies. But the crucial part here, you should be able to capture this, because in many applications, the question how the model was built is one of the business, like one of the high priority business questions.
Yeah. So we just hit the top of the hour. I'm going to let you go. I am just going to mention that we have a Slack group for anybody that is not in it. I'll put it into the chat right now. If you want to jump over into our Slack group, Dmitry's in it. I saw you there the other day.
Yeah, I am.
And otherwise, besides in the Slack group that people can reach out to you on, is there a better way to connect with you if they want to reach out?
Oh, we have like 5 different channels on our website. If you go to dvc.org community, you will see Discord channel. This is our primary one. It's like a Slack.
Yeah.
We have emails and a few more channels. So feel free to use any of those. So I'm here. I'm around. I'm reading all this stuff.
Awesome. So yeah, and next time we get you on, you'll have to give us a walkthrough of DVC and show us a few different of these tricks. Maybe it'll be version 1.1 by then, and or 1.2.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see where we're at.
Yeah. Yes, so yeah, we can definitely do this. It
Cool.
won't be like super fancy session, but people who kind of can work by hand and understand Git at least. So it
Yeah,
might be.
and anybody that's already out there using DVC, please tell us in Slack. We'd love to hear what you're using it for, how you're using it, what you think of it. I think that is something that is great with the community, because you telling us about how you're using DVC can help others see what is working, what's not working, how you're using it, where you find there's trouble, that was the other question that I wanted to ask you, but we ran out of time, is what are some of the challenges that you feel people face when they're using DVC? I guess I can tack it on at the end, unless you got a hard stop right now.
Yeah. I have like 5 more minutes. I think one of the bigger, this is not a user problem, this is our problem, is messaging around DVC. because when you go to website, you might kind of not feel exactly what we are doing, like data versioning, all right, but do I need like a special versioning system? Probably not. I have Git, it's enough for me. It's too much to have another one. And I think this is one of the challenge to kind of to explain the people to explain to people, to potential users, that we are not like replacing your system, versioning system. We just augment the system by data, by ML pipelines and like models, registries. This is, I think, the biggest challenge. And then to get it right, you need to try it. So if you just read about it, it's kind of maybe makes sense, but you will get the idea, I think, only when you go through like our tutorial, or you will try to use DVC for your project. So it just, with some people, it just clicked and they, okay, yeah, I will be using this. And from the description, it's not clear like what exactly it means.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Dmitry, for this time that you spent with us. It was a great session. I really appreciate it. Congrats again on the 5,000 stars on GitHub. That's a huge achievement. And I know it happened a few months ago, but it still is. It's great to see that people are enjoying what you're doing. They're really like taking part, becoming part of the community that you have over there at DVC, I think is really cool. And yeah, I really appreciate you hanging out with us. And I thank everyone for joining us. We will be doing this next week. On Wednesday, though. Actually, on Thursday, we have another talk too. So we have double talk next week too. So if anybody wants to join us on Wednesday or Thursday at the same time, same place, I'll be sending you all out an email with some follow-up info about everything in case you missed the Slack channel or you wanted to know about next week's stuff. So that's it. I think that's all we got for today. Thanks again, Dmitry. And bye, everybody.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. See y'all.